right. Thank you for standing by and welcome to today's Tivoli User Community Ask the Expert series. In today's session, our expert speaker, Ramsey Adam, will discuss configuring the object server as a user repository in Netcool Impact 7.1. Today's webcast is interactive, so you may ask a question at any time using the chat window located in the control panel. Today's session is being recorded, and you'll be provided a copy of today's materials following the call. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to you, Ramsey. Take it away.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, and greetings, everyone. Again, my name is Ramsey Adam. I'm a Level 2 engineer for the Netcool products, mainly Impact and TBSM. And today's presentation, as it mentioned, is on configuring the object server user repository on Impact 7.1. So some of the things we're going to cover is just, and these will be slide presentations with screenshots. I won't be doing any screen shares or anything like that. The reason, just the amount of time it takes for me to type in commands and get results. I don't want to overdraw this, but I think that the screenshots should provide the details and the points that I'm trying to get across. But anyway, we'll cover, just the configuration during installation of the repository, going from local file base to an object server repository, reconfiguring the object server repository to add a second object server, and also to change the object server that you're configuring with or to, and then, of course, disabling object server authentication and going back to local file base. So during the installation, you're going to come to a point where it'll ask you to do the user registry, and so you can at that point select one as the option for the object server. The default host and port and user will already be there, so if you need to adjust those, which most will, you're going to go ahead and do that. And in my case, I've chosen a user called Impact right here, and that Impact user already does exist on the object server. I also put in the password confirmation, and that's it. That's pretty much all you need to do to set up the repository for the object server during installation. Okay. So now let's talk about local file base. Again, during installation, when you get to the registry portion of your selection, you'll choose local file base. The default user for the local file base is Impact Admin, and of course you'll need to enter in passwords for that, or the password, and confirm it, of course. You can go to these directories and check files to actually see what your authentication and how it's set up. So in this case, we go to the Impact Home WLP user shared config directory, and if we have a look at the features XML file and also the the Omnibus registry XML file, you'll see here that there's no mention in this featured file, there's no mention of the object server, and in the Omnibus registry, we don't see any object server information in here either. No hosts, no ports, nothing. And then if we have a look at the Impact Home etc directory, there are like 3 or 4 files that will reflect which user is your Impact Admin user, and as you can see, the Impact Admin user was the one that we selected during installation, and that's reflected here in this file. And I always use the WS admin props file just to have a look at that. But like I said, I think there's a server props file and the name server props file that will also contain the username for the Impact administrator. So let's talk about now changing it over to object server repository. So we go to the Impact Home install security directory. The first thing you're going to want to do is configure the impact NOS properties file. So this is what the default of that file looks like. There's no host name, again, default port, default user. I usually don't alter the impact auth admin name. I'm not using SSL in my examples, and I just stick with the custom realm. So we'll go ahead and edit that, and I've selected my host name where my object server resides. I put in the correct port, and the omnibus user is root. And just keep in mind with this omnibus user, because we're going to enter in the password for that user that's defined in this impact NCOS properties file in our next step. So the next step, of course, is to now run the configuration script. If you just run it without any commands, it'll actually show you a description of it and some examples of what you need to do. So that's why I just did it here, just to show you that. So you can see that it requires you enable it. It requires the username. Now the username that you're going to specify is the new impact administrator that your administrative user that you're wanting to use, and then its password. The next password that you select is the object server administrative user, which is the one that we this user right here in this properties file. So that's why that password's used. And then the final password is what the current administrative impact user is, which was my LDAP. Which was my local file-based user, impact admin, and I know his password's netcool. So yeah, there's a lot of netcools here, and it's a really unique password. But we run the script, we enable it. Here's the new administrative user that's on the object server that I want to impact administrative user I want to use, its password. Here's the root user's password for the object server, and here is the current password for the local file-based administrative user. Very, like I said, it's a little confusing, but it's not too bad. So we go ahead and run the script, and that's what it's going to look like when you start running it. And hopefully, upon completion, it will say build successful. And now we can have a look and see how that fared. First thing, we can again look at the WAS admin properties file. You can see now that the user is impact, whereas before it was impact admin, and that's an object server user. And then if we go back to the WLP user shared config directory, we can look at that features XML file, and we now see that the omnibus registry was entered in. And we can also see the object server information also now being reflected in this omnibus registry XML file. That's it. It's configured and ready to go. So if there are any questions on that, and if not, I can move on to the next.
There's no questions yet, Ramsey.
Okay, sounds good. So we've gone from local file base to, and again, I just want to show you this real quick. These are the XML files that were in the config directory, and before that, they look like this. Again, there's no omnibus information in the features, and no port or host information in the XML file for the omnibus registry. And you'll also, of course, see that those files will probably have a pretty recent date or timestamp, and they've been touched. Okay, so now we're going to reconfigure and add a secondary object server. Again, we just edit that properties file in the install security directory, the impact NCOS properties file, and we just add the secondary object server information. You're going to want to make sure, of course, that the users exist on both object servers, and then the passwords are the same. And that's pretty standard. So we edit that file, and again, we run the config, very similar to what we ran before, same users, passwords, whatnot. If it's successful, that's hopefully what you're going to see, build successful when it's finished. And we can go back to the shared config directory in the WLP user and look at the Omnibus registry XML file, and we can see that now this backup host and port's been added. And that's it. That's that simple for adding a secondary object server. Okay, so let's move on.
We do have a couple of questions.
Oh yeah, sure.
Will you be showing the object server repository configuration when impact is clustered?
Okay, so I haven't done any clustering in this presentation. I will say that impact, I have to look into that. I'm not sure if, I believe that the impact servers share the GUI server as far as the user, so I don't, your impact servers are clustered. The information on the secondary server should be pointing back to the primary for its repository, but I can look into that and see if there needs to be separate configuration done on the secondary server, but I believe that it doesn't. Again, that's something I can look into. Hopefully that answers. Sorry, I didn't have a complete answer for you on that one.
That's all right. There was one other question.
Sure.
In the configuration here, can you discuss the different users and the roles, the difference between the impact user, which was for the object server repository, and impact admin for the
Okay,
file
so
base?
yeah, there really shouldn't be any difference. I mean, the user that, okay, so the local file-based user, impact administrator, is just the administrative impact user that's defined for local file-base. And, you know, back to the object server user, let me go back on that. Sorry. So again, your administrative user is going to be defined in here. So now the new impact administrative user is what you've set it to as the user in the object server. So it doesn't. Their roles are the same, and you do have to define the roles for that impact user when you do enable your impact server. You do need to define the roles, and that's done with the map role command. I haven't included that in this presentation, but if you run, let's go back here, sorry. It's in the same directory as where you do the configuration for the object server. It's this map role sh script. So if you just, when you're done configuring your impact server to run the object server as the repository and you've defined your administrative user, you would then add roles to that user and you run the map role command. And if you just run the command similar to how I ran this without any options, it'll show you what options you need in order to set that up. So they're basically, in the end, the same users. Whether it's local file base or object server, whatever user you've defined as the impact administrative user, it should have the same roles and capabilities. Of course, again, you have to define the user, add the roles to that user once you've authenticated or once you've set up a repository for the object server on that. So hopefully that was clear, sort of.
Yes, that helps, Ramsey. And I think he wanted to know that in your examples, the impact is the user that's in the object server, and you had impact admin was your file-based repository user.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. During installation, again, we'll go back to that screen if I can. Okay, during installation, we chose local file base, and the impact administrative user is the default user for local file base. So that user gets set up with roles. It should, I think it's just the full administrator or impact full administrator role, I believe, is how it's set up post installation. And then, right, so this user here is basically going to be the same user that you defined when you set up the impact to use object server repository, and you define your user. So right now the impact user here is a user that exists on the object server. So it's going to have the same, and if you try and use impact admin, it's not going to work anymore. Unless you have impact admin user on your object server. Okay. Okay. Is there another question, Christina?
That's it for now.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about changing the object server. Again, you're going to go back to the install security directory. You're going to edit the impact NOS props file, and you can see here I commented out my secondary, and I've actually made it my primary, and I'm making it the only object server that I'm using. So it is changing my primary object server to the one that's on this machine, this server. That's it. You just edit that. You run the enable. Now, one thing I want to point out here too is I've also changed the impact user to a different user on my object server, and I'm going to make that my new impact administrative user. It's called NCO admin. That's the NCO admin's password. Here's the root password that we've defined in this file again, which is netcol. And then here is the password of the previous administrative user, which was my impact user that was on the object server. I'm going back and forth here, but that's the impact user from my other object server's password. So that's where that comes into play on this last password. Go ahead and run the script. Again, hopefully if it's successful, it'll say successful. And then we can verify its success by looking in the Omnibus registry XML file again. And we can see, sorry about that, backup host. I have the wrong screenshot here, guys. Okay, wait. Here we go. Okay, so I've changed it. So now here's looking at the administrative user. Like on the WS admin props, I've got my new user, NCO admin, and looking at the Omnibus registry XML file, you can see it pointing to this new host and port, and that's how you can verify that that went successfully. So that's pretty much it for changing both users and object servers. Again, you'll have to make sure you add roles for this user, and you run that map role command, and it'll guide you on how to go ahead and add that add roles for that user. So hopefully that's fairly clear. Okay. Is there another question? Sorry.
There's no more questions yet.
Okay. So I think the last thing I'm going to show you is going back to file-based authentication. Again, you can just run the config auth stuff, and without any options, it'll show you how you're supposed to run the disable. When we run the disable, the things that we need to define are who's going to be the new local file base impact admin user, and I'm going back to impact admin, which was my original user, and its password, and then the current password of the impact admin user that I had just set up for the object server, and that was, this password's Tivoli for that user, and that was the user that was set up when I set up my take that back. The second time I set up my, sorry, I gotta find the right screen here. Okay. I apologize. Okay, so when I redefined, when I reconfigured my object server to a different object server, yeah. So NCO admin, when I changed it to the other object server, I also changed users. That was his password Tivoli. So that's where that comes into play here on when I'm going back to local file base. Forgive me. So back to local file base, there's the Tivoli password for that impact admin user that I had just before. So we run the disable, the new impact admin user, its password, and the old impact admin user's password. Hopefully when you run that, and it gets completed, and you'll know build successful. We can verify, again, the new users in the WAS admin props file, and that'll be the new impact administrative user. Now that user should already have information stored in Liberty, so you probably don't have to re-add the roles for this user unless you never installed local file base. If you started out initially using the object server authentication, then there would be no information for this user, so you'd have to add the rules for that administrative user, even for local file base. But if you'd started out with local file base, that information should already be there, and you probably don't need to go back and remap the roles. You can, and if you do, it's not going to hurt anything. And then you can also check the config directory and look at the features XML file, and you'll now see that the object server information's gone, and you'll also see the details for the object server in the Omnibus registry has been wiped out, so it doesn't look like this anymore. Sorry. Yeah. Actually, let me go back to another slide that's a little better. There we go. Right. No, that's not it either. Sorry. Bear with me. Okay. Right. So again, that features, this will be gone, Omnibus registry, and of course the object server registry information is gone as well. So when you go back to local file base, it should look like this. And that's really all I have for now. So if there are any questions.
Okay, there are a few questions.
Okay.
Does the impact server need to be running during this configuration?
Right. So when you run the config, script, it does stop and start impact. So if it isn't running, it will actually start it up for you. And when this config script is completed and it's successful, the impact server and the GUI server will be running. So if it's not running, it will get started and it will get running. So.
Okay, great. Does the object server you are attempting to set up on the repository with need to be running? So does the object server need to be running as well?
Yeah, and it will, right. So when you run, again, when you run this, well, this is the disabled, but when you run the script for to enable it, it does want to check with Omnibus and make sure that that user exists and that the object server is running. And if it isn't, you're not going to get the build successful. It's going to error out and tell you that it failed. So.
Can you use a different Omnibus user beside the root user during the configuration?
Yeah, okay, so that's back here. Let's see. Right. So this user here, it doesn't have to be root. The important thing, and like it says just above there, that whatever user you use for Omnibus has to have access and be able to change and edit the users.security table on the object server. So, it could be any user that has access to that. And I believe normal users, I'm not sure, from an Omnibus standpoint, I think normal users might have access. You might know, Christina.
No,
but yeah,
they don't. You would
they
have to
don't.
be a super user or a
Super
system
user.
user.
All right. Cool. Thanks for clarifying that. So any of your super users, I guess, could be used, but no, it doesn't have to be root. I think we just have it there as default. So.
Okay, there's one more question. Does the Omnibus user you're attempting to make as the impact administrator user need to already exist in Omnibus, or can you add that user to Omnibus after configuring the user repository on impact?
Right. So, yeah, I've tested that, and even if the impact server is running, if you've got where's the screen here? Yeah, let me get back to the configuration screen. Sorry. There we go. So right, if you're going to enable it and this impact user does not exist on Omnibus, even if it's running, it won't work. You're going to get a failed. So that user already has to be there. It's not something you can do afterwards. So go to Omnibus, set up your user that you want to use as your impact administrative user, and then go ahead and run this script. So. Yep.
Okay, great. If we don't have any more questions.
Cool. So the slides will be available, and you guys can hopefully you can get enough out of them. If there's any questions that you have for me, I'm not sure if my email, I don't have it included in the slides, but that, or we can open a PMR or try and contact me. I can try and include my email in the last slide there before I send it. So.
Okay, I can send it out to the group chat also.
Okay, yeah, do that. Sounds good. All right, well, thanks for being patient and sitting through the presentation. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. And Ramsey, thank you for offering your time and sharing your knowledge with us. Definitely appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. Please do take a few moments to fill out your post-event survey. Your input is very important to us, and we use it to tweak our future events. But this concludes today's conference, and you may now disconnect. Have a wonderful day.